And welcome to today's webinar, Network Engineer as a Service. I'm Gleeson, Vice President of Client Development here at Fpweb.net. And joining us today, one of our esteemed colleagues, Derrell Brame. He's joining us. He's one of our infrastructure engineers. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Couldn't do it without you. All right. So today's agenda, what is Network Engineer as a Service? We're really going to dig into that and make sure that we've got some pretty clear definitions about what that is. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what is the value of managed network as a service, what to look for in a network engineer as a service. And then, as always, we'll take questions. And make sure you feel free to submit them as they come up, and that way we can have those queued up and ready to go at the end of our webinar today. And once we do end the webinar in completeness, I don't even know if that's a word, but I'm just making things up. $50 Amazon gift card. We're going to have that for you as well when we get done today. So that's the agenda for today. Maybe tell us a little bit about what does the day-to-day look like for a network engineer.
Yeah. So the day-to-day for a network engineer, we're not talking about LAN and WAN. We're not talking about firewalls, routers, and switches right now. Preferably, when a network engineer as a service comes in, those are already set up and ready to go. What we're talking about is managing the operating systems. Windows Server, Windows Desktop, Laptop, Mac OS, and Linux as well.
All right, so here's a motion graphic Derrell helped us put together that gives a 30,000-foot view of what a network engineer actually does.
This is a basic diagram of a network. The cloud at the top is the internet service provider, where all of the information comes in and leaves the network. When information comes into a network, it first hits the router and sends it to its destination within the internal network. Before getting anywhere, it needs to get through the process by the firewall. The firewall scans for any malicious software and monitors who is sending the info, where it's supposed to go, and makes sure that it's traveling over the appropriate ports as well. Once it gets past the firewall, these packets move to their destination, which could be an Exchange server, a web front end, or a local machine. Here, information is in the network and is currently moving to a server, whether that server is a host or a virtual machine. The network administrator monitors these packets and ensures that they are getting to where they need to go within the network. As information is coming in, there can be instances where communication is halted somewhere from within the environment, whether that be an issue with the firewall not sending the packet to that destination, a switch not routing the information to that destination, the host or virtual machine is not accepting traffic, or ports can simply be closed. A network engineer comes in and will troubleshoot these issues, clean up the paths, clear bottlenecks, and continue communications as it was prior to the issue. Network engineers help keep your network clean, stable, and running smoothly.
So that was a 30,000-foot view of network engineering as a service and what is really required of there. And like I said previously, we're not talking about firewalls, routers, and switches, LAN and WAN, because like I said, that's hopefully already set up and ready to go. But one thing it does include, and one thing that does happen for a network engineer, is network monitoring the packets and the communications over the network to make sure every device with an IP is communicating to one another that needs to communicate to one another, and to see if there's any bottlenecks, to see if there are packets being dropped somewhere, and there's a lack of communication somewhere on the network. And that in itself also leads to the next part, which is network troubleshooting. What do you do when there are packets being dropped, when there's devices that aren't communicating to one another? The monitoring helps us to see where those are, and then we can start troubleshooting from there to look for anything. Maybe there's some IPs that are off. There's IPs that aren't communicating. There's a renew issue with the IP lease. It could be any number of things. And so the monitoring helps us to define those and to find them and get them off your network so everything can communicate the way it should. Another part of this is Isp Management. We can also help manage, you know, your internet service provider and as far as your bandwidth goes, what the in and out speed is to help you know, your connections outside of your network if you need that, and to see if you need more bandwidth coming in for any number of business reasons. This also includes you know, domain management as well. You know, building trust within your different domains to make sure they function and communicate properly. You know, your domain management is kind of like your phone book for your entire network. You know, and this also includes, you know, your domain name server, your DHCP server, and, you know, your IP scopes, leasing them out. There was a company I used to work for. They had their IP scopes were based on the floor of the building. They had 4 floors, and so let's say your network IP scope was 172.30.0.0 and subnet 16 or 255.255.0.0. Anyway, so they had the floor set up so that floor 1 was 172.30.1.0 and everything on floor 1 was within that. 172.30.2.0 it was floor 2 and then, you know, .3 and .4 and so on and so on. So, you know, that helps your network engineer out to identify where an issue is. You can also help them physically locate the issue to see maybe there could be a bad wire that needs to be fixed and replaced. It just one of those things, one of those little minor details that can really help the troubleshooting process out. It also includes Active Directory as well, and, you know, helping to get your groups and your settings in there, your users, authentication to make sure the appropriate users are authenticating to where they need to be and where they need to go. And then this also helps to include virtualization. Virtualization is huge in networks nowadays. It allows you to use minimal resources but still have a big environment. It allows you to use one host and have 20 servers on a host potentially. And some of the biggest names in virtualization right now are obviously Microsoft's hypervisor and VMware as well. And these are systems that, you know, we're familiar with here. We use them on a daily basis in our infrastructure. And, you know, it allows us to, you know, create new servers, create desktops, and other resources that our users can use. It helps create virtual LANs so we can subnet out different areas of our network as well. Also come into domain management and building trust, like I said, and subnetting everything. It's one of those things that it can make a system run very smoothly. And then, as well as this can also include System Center, which allows you to push out software to your machines, push out patches, and using WOOS as well. Patching is so important. A lot of people fail to realize how important patching is, because just because they don't see the bugs and see the issues on their machines right then and there, it doesn't mean they're not there. For example, over the weekend we just heard about the WannaCry ransomware virus that came out and potentially could have affected and hurt a lot of Windows machines. Did you know that Microsoft actually pushed that patch out for that malware back in March? And so if you've been patching regularly every month as Microsoft pushes out their software and their patches on the second Tuesday of every month, you would have had that patch in March, 2 months ahead of time. And people just fail to realize that. That's why patching is so important. We can also help with desktop support, you know, helping users troubleshoot issues, and with the communications with printers and other end user stuff, because that can sometimes you just never know what can happen there. Network engineer as a service, we can also help with your network capacity planning. You know, by monitoring your network, we get to see it very thoroughly. We can see the bottlenecks, and bottlenecks aren't necessarily always packets being dropped and a lack of communication. It could be that you've grown so much that you have a lot more traffic than you used to going over the network, and so you need to build up your network again to allow more traffic through, to allow, you know, higher speeds. And also goes back to your ISP with bandwidth going in and out. Hardware health and maintenance. We wish technology would last forever, but as technology is ever evolving and ever changing, network resources and hardware resources also grow, and they can go bad as well. We've had an issue before where we've had a host die on us, and it was just a random RAID controller going out. There was no indication beforehand. It just went out, and so we had to plan for that. Luckily, we had backup hosts that we could migrate all of our VMs to right away and get everything back up and running fairly quickly. And then, of course, there's also end-of-life management, planning for the future, upgrading your technology, and knowing where you need to go later on. And then also, of course, there's the potential to talk about VoIP management. If that's something you're interested in, we can have a talk about that as well.
Wow, that was a mouthful.
A little bit, yeah.
A lot of information there. So what is the value of managed network service?
Well, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and the Robert Half Technology Survey, it's estimated that the network architects make between $85,000 and about $117,750 a year. Salary.com says that the average U.S. salary with benefits for a network engineer level 3 is about $133,000.
So those salaries don't take into account the sunk costs of time, though, either, no. And those are substantial salaries. But there's actually more to it when you start looking into it. You know, there's also time spent finding, hiring, training these niche experts in a shrinking IT talent pool. And you know, this is a common theme that we've come back to again and again in our webinars, and that's simply this: number one, can you find the people? We've talked to many people every single day that they're just having a hard time finding the right type of person, regardless anyway. And then if you can find that person, can you afford them? This is also a reoccurring issue. And if you're lucky enough to be able to bypass those first two hurdles, the next one is, okay, can you retain that talent? So there's always concerns about retaining those folks once you might be able to get them in the door in the first place, even if you are lucky enough to do that. So now that we've established that a managed network engineer as a service is a worthwhile alternative, or at least an option worth exploring, what should you know for look for actually in a network engineer as a service?
Well, I guess it depends all on what you value. You know, one is, do you value access to support? Is, you know, having that managed services, there are times where obviously you may need to help troubleshooting something. So is access to support something that's important to you? And along with access to support, what about response time? Are you looking for a response within a couple hours or two? How about support availability? Are you looking for a true 24/7 support or just a call center after business hours? There's also the expertise and escalation process. You know, there's times where you could be on the phone with a customer support agent and they escalate you up, and you have to keep explaining your situation to every person that you talk to, and which can get very frustrating at times. Also, does the location of the support matter to you? Do you want a local US-based support? Is that important? Do you want support and a managed service that is familiar with an understanding of your network? There is no cookie cutter network. No network is the same. Every network is different. Every network has its little niches and aspects to it that make it unique. You know, if a company comes to you and says that they can instantly spin up a service and jump right into the automated cookie cutter process, one size fits all, is that what you need?
So that's really a solid checklist of what to look for in a managed network engineer as a service. Now, you know, look, this is our webinar, so shameless plug. We're gonna talk a little bit about ourselves here and understand a little bit more about our services. So access to support. Derrell said to ask if hours or days were important. You know, Fpweb responds within 45 minutes on-prem, 30 minutes from a public cloud standpoint, and then of course our very famous 6-minute SLA, along with being hosted here with Fpweb in our private cloud. Support availability. Derrell said to ask if it is truly 24/7 or just a call center after hours. Fpweb has a level 1 engineer on call 24/7, 365. As a matter of fact.
Yeah. So I was actually I'm one of the on-call guys. At times we have a rotation that goes on, and we are 24/7, 365. I was on call over the Thanksgiving week. I got a call Thanksgiving morning. I took care of it. It was not a big deal, but it was, you know, I think just important to the customer that they know that they have support when they need it, even during the holidays.
And you know, Derrell was such a magician that his turkey was perfect regardless. So
yeah.
So he had that going for him too. Therefore, you know, that escalation process is only one other step. It's not a call center just taking a message. It's a live USA-based engineer with access to 20 years of experience and working on those tickets 24/7, 365. Location of support. Derrell asked if USA-based support is important. Now, I don't think I have to go out on a limb here to say if any of you have ever experienced the frustration of not being able to understand an accent of an overseas support provider, and that's for anything that you've ever had to call over there for. That's, that service that you're paying for. You might want to consider it's important that Fpweb's support is all USA based, and everyone that you deal with here is in St. Louis, Missouri. The last thing that Derrell mentioned in his list of what you should look for in a network engineer as a service was familiarity with and understanding of your network. So at Fpweb.net, we're going to take the time to do a proper discovery up front so that we can earn the right to be your network engineer as a service. We'll be very familiar with your network and have a thorough understanding of it. And this is absolutely critical of everything that we do. You have to go through that discovery process as well, so that we can really get a good handle on this and be able to escalate in a timely manner. And that's how we've kind of earned our stripes over the years. All right. So for more information, we'd like for you to give us a call at www.fpweb.net/managed-services/network-engineer. I really don't expect you to remember that, but maybe you could write it down. Another easy way for us to get in contact with each other is if you just email me at sales@fpweb.net, or you can just pick up the phone, and that number again is 866-780-4678. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our questions at this point. I have a few up here. So how many hours do I get with this?
So with the subscription-based plan, it's based on a 40-hour work week network engineer workload, but it's not a bank of hours that you need to keep track of and replenish with an unbudgeted purchases and additional time. It's the same payment each month.
All right, so I think that's also really important to stress is that unlike, we still do banks, but the fact of the matter is with the subscription service, you're not having to keep, it's like that full-time employee, you're just not paying all these benefits to and so forth. All right, so another question that we had here is, what is the commitment?
So it's an annual contract. Most customers choose between the 1 and 5 year agreement to take advantage of discounts.
Right. So, and a lot of people say, well, why would anybody, do this for a long period of time or commit themselves to a 3-year or more agreement? And the reason for that is easy. I think more and more people are cashing in, or at least from the CFO standpoint, making sure that they're as close as they can be to an OpEx model. And those are those month in, month out fixed prices that are important to a lot of organizations at this point. And you can lock in a much greater, a much better rate if you're willing to do that now versus waiting, doing this year to year, and then you can assume that there will be price increases as a result of that.
Yeah.
6-minute response time. Did you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So we have a question here from Lewis Lindsay, and the question here about a 6-minute response time, and they're asking, is that to the email or to the ticket? And that's in our ticketing system. One thing that our support team stresses is getting that first response on there, and to let you know, hey, we're looking at this issue, because I think that's so important to our customers, is that we acknowledge that we see their issue and that we're on it. We don't wait 20-30 minutes till we find a solution and then let them know, hey, we got a solution and we fixed it already, because then that's a 30-minute limbo where they're wondering what's going on. It's like, no, we respond right away, let you know we're looking at it, and that we're going to update you once we have something. And usually we try to keep those updates fairly regularly, depending, obviously on the severity of the issue. If it's something is down, we're trying to update you saying we're still looking into it, we're researching this, we're researching that, and just letting you know what our process is.
That's perfect. One of the other questions that we received is, what is the cost? If we ever get through one of these webinars where somebody doesn't ask what the cost is, I will be shocked. But it's relevant, right? How much does it? It all sounds great. What's the value? And one of the things I want to make sure that people understand is, when we're going about these solutions, there is discovery required, because I think, unfortunately, some folks have been in the past maybe put into a bucket. So meaning, well, here, I got a price, and this is what the price is, and this is based on a 40-hour FTE, but they don't really understand what the requirement is for that person. Meaning, do you really need 1 FTE? do you need a half a FTE? Do you need multiple FTEs, depending on what the workload is for that environment? And I think there's a general misunderstanding of what the need really is, and that's why it's so important to do a discovery first. Don't fall into the trap of just saying, yeah, here's my money, I just need this off my plate. Sometimes I think that's easy, but when you get into those situations, you'll often find yourself feeling like you might be trapped because you've signed up for something and didn't really understand what the true need was. That all comes from making sure that a discovery is completed up front. Another question we've got is pricing a flat rate, or does it depend on the number of users or nodes? I'll let you take this one.
Well, and yes, that goes back to discovery is required. As Brad was just talking about, different companies and different clients are going to need different things. Someone may have 20 users and maybe 30 or 40 devices that need IPs that are on the network. And then we could have another client that has 400 employees and about 600 devices that is attached to their network, and then they need monitoring for. So obviously, discovery is going to really open up to what they will need and what they're going to require. And maybe they don't need their whole network monitored, maybe they just need a section of it. And so obviously, it just depends on what the discovery finds and what needs to be done.
Okay. I have another question coming in asking about backups.
So backups are obviously a very important when it comes to infrastructure. It can save you a lot of time and hassle when something goes down. We had an issue earlier this year where we had a host go down. It was just a random, the RAID went out, and we had to move everything off that host. And luckily, we had backups of all the VMs, and we were able to move those off to other hosts and get those servers up and running. We had everything up and running in about a little less than 24 hours after it went down. And and even today with with the ransomware scare that we had this past weekend, backups are one of the great ways to combat ransomware, because if you have proper backups, you can go back a day or two, or even two weeks, and depending on your retention plan, maybe even further. That allows you to go back before the ransomware has taken over your environment. It gives you a chance to go in, find the ransomware before it's active, remove it, clean up the system, and get back going there. That way you're not affected by ransomware.
Yeah, great question. All right, so as a matter of fact, we're actually planning a future webinar just about backups because we feel it's that important.
Yep.
So we'll have more information on that as things make themselves available to us. So we're going to take another question at this point. How does the DR and backup work?
So the DR stands, for those that don't know, DR stands for disaster recovery, and that's kind of what I was just mentioning with the ransomware, is that when it's worst case scenario, server failure or is corrupted, and the disaster recovery is a snapshot of that server or the VDI, but usually it's most importantly obviously the servers. It's a snapshot of that server that can be put back in place on the same host if need be, or it could be moved to a completely separate host. It also, if needed, we've had to do that a couple times for different clients if we needed to move hosts, just for a disaster recovery scenario, and it allows us to, it reduces the time that they're down. It reduces the time that they can't work, and it makes things a lot easier, because otherwise, if you don't have disaster recovery, you don't have backups, you've just lost all that data, and depending on what that data could be, it could be client information, it could be proprietary information about your product and your processes that's irreplaceable. And backups, that's why backups are so important that you have in your environment. And that is something else that we do offer here at Fpweb.
Great. We had one other question asking about our escalation process. What does that actually look like when a ticket or a call comes in? How do things get sourced?
So obviously everything, as we mentioned before, not just with the on-call after-hour support, everything goes through these support team first, the level 1 engineer, and we have some very capable gentlemen that are able to handle information as it comes in, even deal with a lot of different situations, and they know what they can handle and what they can't handle. And whenever they have questions, they're able to escalate it up, depending on the issue, up to the managed services team, who are a little bit more expert, have a little bit more expertise when it comes to the server side of information. And then if there's a networking issue, something's not communicating, or something's down, something's been shunned, or something like that, they'll move it over to the infrastructure team where we can take a look at it. And so we're very good and we're very quick about it. We know what we can handle, what we can't, and who to go to specifically when there's a issue.
Great, great. Well, as always, we will always email a recording of this webinar by Thursday, along with a link to register for our next webinar, which will be May 30th at 1 p.m. Central. We'll come out with what the topic is for that one just as soon as we possibly can. I think it's time to announce the winner of our $50 Amazon gift card, and Bill's going to pass that over to us. And the winner is, I think it's Lewis Lindsay. Lewis, congratulations, you're the winner of a $50 Amazon gift card. Thank you so much for joining us today for Network as an Engineer as a Service. And again, that next webinar will be coming May 30th at 1 p.m. I'd like to thank Derrell for joining us today, and we'll have another exciting webinar for you here in a couple of weeks. Thanks for joining.